So I have another Photoshop tutorial for you today, and this one is decorative type, and we're going to be making monster text. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Go ahead and create a new document. Go under File, New, and let's go ahead and use a 1080 HD size. So that would be 1920 for the width, and the height would be 1080, and the resolution is 72 pixels per inch, and just hit return. And here's our new document. So let's go ahead and create a background for this. We're going to kind of do a spotlight effect of a green background. So I've got some colors chosen. The foreground color, I'm going to use 009600 for the hex value. And click OK. For the background, I'm going to be using 003300 for the background. And this will give us a nice spotlight effect. So hit OK there. So now go to your gradient tool and make sure that radial gradient is chosen up top. So let's go ahead and just from the center drag out a selection, and there you go. We'll get a spotlight effect going. Now let's go ahead and give this a little bit of texture. So go up to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and around 3% is pretty good. Make sure distribution is uniform and your monochromatic is checked. And click OK. Alright, so let's go ahead and get our text going here. I found a font called Clubberlang at dafont.com, and it's a nice kind of monstrous looking font. So I'm going to go to my type tool, and I'm going to go ahead and set my font color, and that color is going to be 3B7200, kind of a mid yellowish green there. So click OK. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type creature. Big type. Alright. So now we're going to be applying a lot of different layer effects to this text to get it to really look like kind of like monster skin. So the first thing we want to do is give it a bevel and emboss. And for this you want to make sure that inner bevel is chosen. Technique is smooth. For the depth, let's go to 815%. Size will be 2. And let's put 1 for the soften. Now for the shading, let's go ahead and uncheck global light and put the altitude at 40% or 40 degrees. The gloss contour, let's use this bottom left one called half round. And click OK. For the highlight mode, change that to overlay. And for that color, let's give it kind of a yellowish color. So that's going to be, I've got a color chosen, FFFB92. Nice kind of pale yellow. Hit OK. Opacity 75% is good. And for shadow mode, let's keep that multiplied, but let's change it to green. So the green I have chosen is 007 D52, kind of a darker sea green color, and hit OK. So now that we got that figured out, let's go ahead and add a contour. So click on your contour tab, and we're going to give it kind of the same rounded half round contour, and let's go ahead and click on anti-aliased and set the range to 61%. Now this is where we get kind of into more of a real monster skin look. Let's go to texture, and for the pattern, if you don't have textures loaded, what you want to do is click the gear icon, and you're going to want to load patterns 2 and patterns. Each one is going to have a texture we're going to use. So for this one, let's go ahead and use the one, it should just be called water. Let's see. Yes, water. Alright. So now that we have that texture chosen, let's go ahead and set the scale to 200%. And the depth, let's set that to 38. And everything else should be good. Alright, let's give this an inner glow. So check inner glow. And this all looks good. Screen opacity, let's turn it down to 24%. The Everything else looks good. Choke, leave that at 0. Size, let's bump size up to 38 pixels. The contour, let's go ahead and, you know what, let's leave the contour as the default, which is just linear. And that should be good. Alright, so now let's go to satin, toggle that on. Now we want to keep that at multiply. Turn the opacity down to about 28-30%. And I just closed it out, so let's open that back up. Angle, let's set the angle to about 110, 111 degrees. Distance, 34. Size, 35. The contour should be, let's go to linear. And that all looks good. Alright, so now let's go to gradient overlay and give this a little more shadow. So the gradient overlay, you're going to want to use, we're going to go from a dark green to transparent. So go ahead and click on your gradient selection here. And we're going to set both colors to the same. So I'm going to go ahead and change this color to 295000. Hit OK. And the right slider, we're going to do the same. So I'm going to change the color there to the same color, 295000. OK. But now I'm going to click the opacity on the right end and turn that down to 0. And hit OK. Now our angle looks good, 90 degrees. And I think we're almost done with this first type layer. So now let's go to outer glow. And this will kind of help pick it off the page a little bit. Blend mode, let's go to normal. Let's turn the opacity down to 36%. Let's go ahead and we're going to make this kind of a darker green. So I'm going to take a swatch of a darker green color out here. And that looks good. 003600. Hit OK. So the spread, leave that at 0%. But the size, let's turn that up to 46 pixels. And everything else looks good. And then last but not least, a drop shadow. Let's really pick this up off the background and give it a little bit of pop. So for drop shadow, keep the blend mode at multiply, keep the opacity at 75%, uncheck use global light, and set the degree to 90. We're going to go from a top down light source. The distance, 31 pixels. Spread at 0, size at 13. And everything else looks good. Let's leave it like that. You might want to come back and play with the opacity a little bit. Let's leave it like that. So now we've got our base excuse me, our base text layer done, and what we're going to simply do is duplicate this layer and create some additional effects for the top end of the graphic. So go ahead and press Control J. So we have a copy of our creature text. And for this text, let's go ahead and select it to change the color. And we're going to pick kind of a burnt red color. So the color I have here is 9F3611. Click OK. And you can already see we have the text is really coming to life now with this new kind of warmer color on top. So on your layer effects, go ahead and deselect drop shadow. We're not going to need a drop shadow since our bottom layer already has one. But we're going to have to change a few of these to be a little bit different. So go ahead and double click bevel and emboss. And for here, let's go ahead and leave everything pretty much the same. The only real thing we're going to change is highlight mode. Change the yellow to more of a white. So something like FFFEE1. And click OK. Now we're going to change the texture as well. So click on texture, and the texture you want to find is one called zebra, and that should be under patterns. So let's go ahead and find it. Some of these are kind of hard to see. Ah, there it is, zebra. Make sure that's selected. Your scale, let's turn that up to closer to 300%. And the depth, let's turn that to 46%. And make sure that invert is selected. Alright, so there's not much more we're going to do to this layer that's different. Let's go ahead and add a stroke to this layer though. So click stroke, and we're going to change the fill type to gradient. And for this stroke, we're also going to go from a opaque to a transparent color. So we're going to go ahead and change the size to 1 pixel and position that inside. Blend mode is normal, everything else looks good, but let's go ahead and click on our gradient slider. And let's go ahead and pick the same color yellow for both. So I'm going to pick kind of a brighter yellow, FFD45. Now before you close that out, double click inside this text field and press Control C to copy that hex value. And press OK. Now let's go to the right slider and set the color there as well. Control V into the hex value, click OK. But now go to the right opacity slider, click that, and turn the opacity to 0. Okay. But now we want the stroke to start at the top and disappear as it goes downward. So set the angle to 90%. And now our stroke should disappear down here at the bottom. And that's all we have for this layer for as far as layer effects. So now we're going to kind of give it a creature-ish effect to kind of break up the text here. So click OK. Now go to your pen tool and let's just kind of create a wavy line to go through the middle of the text here. So I'm just going to start using my pen tool, and I've got it set to path, and I'm just going to kind of follow the midpoint of these letters, but you don't have to be precise. This is definitely where you just kind of have fun with it and see what shape takes place. And so now when you have kind of a wave done, go ahead and select around the top of the text, because this is going to be our mask. So now that I have a path created here, I'm going to right click in it and I'm going to select Make Selection. Anti-alias is on, feather radius is 0, and it's a new selection, so click OK. Now simply with our top layer selected, go ahead and create the layer mask icon. And there you go. You've got kind of that creature effect. Now one other little detail that I like to do is let's go ahead and just kind of paint some little circles on this mask to kind of break up the edge and give it a little more monster creature feel. So with your mask selected, go to your paintbrush tool, and we're going to have the foreground to the color white, and we're going to pick a round hard brush, and let's turn the size up a little bit, and this is where you just kind of have fun with it. And I'm going to turn the size up to about 30 pixels. So now along this edge, creeping from the zebra orange into the green, I'm just going to kind of paint on the mask some little circles here to give it, to break it up a little bit. Just like so. And you can play around, just have fun, see what becomes of it. But this gives it a much more kind of monster look. Now if you go back and you change the foreground color to black, we can knock out some pieces too. So you can kind of do some interesting stuff. I'm going to turn my brush size down to about 15 pixels and knock out some spaces to kind of give it a little more variety here. Kind of like so. And last but not least, I'm going to turn the foreground back to white, and I'm going to paint kind of down into the letters to kind of give it kind of a droplet effect. So you see how you can kind of just click around and give it almost like, it almost looks like lizard skin or something. And just kind of go around. And there you have it. You have some monster creature text. Now feel free to play around with other texture types for the bevel and emboss section of the layer effects, and also play around with different colors. You can do all sorts of different variations and gradients and what have you. You can leave the, like if we disable the mask, that even looked pretty cool, just how it was like this. Gives it a real kind of jungle feeling. But yeah, just have fun with it. Hopefully this gives you kind of some ideas to play around with type and have some fun and just make something new. Alright, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you later.